I'm Ross Duvall, and I'm President and CEO of Heartland Forward. If you haven't heard of us before, we'd like to describe ourselves as a think and do tank on a mission to improve economic performance in the center of the United States. We conduct research and advocate for solutions to foster job creation, knowledge-based and inclusive growth, and improved health outcomes. This past year has brought into clear focus the critical role that high-speed internet connectivity plays in making those goals achievable. That's why we're embarking on a new campaign we call Connecting the Heartland to accelerate progress and bridge gaps that prevent states and communities from realizing their goals of universal connectivity. We intend for today's workshop to be the first in an ongoing series that brings together leaders from the Beltway with those from the Heartland. Each session will focus on a specific aspect of the country's digital divide. We will hopefully provide a stage for sharing actionable ideas and improving coordination between DC and stakeholders at the state and local levels. Today's focus is on the unprecedented opportunity before us to leverage record federal stimulus dollars to help millions of Americans, from students to job seekers to seniors, finally gain access to high-speed internet service that they can afford. We are grateful for Acting FCC Chair Jessica Rosenworcel and her staff for taking time to share their vision and explore how to make sure we are maximizing the impact of funds coming through the agency. I also want to thank the National Urban League and Land O'Lakes for convening this series with us. A few housekeeping notes. Following our conversation with Acting Chairwoman Rosenworcel, we will have two segments of moderated open discussion. We really want to take advantage of the breadth of expertise and experience in this group to help inform how we move forward. So please be ready to speak up. If you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, please use the raise hand function or enter your question in the chat box. We suggest that you select speaker view in the top right corner of your screen. And as everyone knows by now, if we are not speaking, please keep your microphone muted during the discussion. Lastly, this event is being recorded and we do have a reporter participating, so please note that all comments are on the record. Now I'd like to introduce Joy Cheney, Executive Director of the DC Bureau and Senior Vice President for Policy and Advocacy at the National Urban League. Joy, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Ross, and to everyone at the Heartland Group, as well as all of my fellow panelists. Today is going to be a great conversation, and I'm thrilled to see it's just the beginning. We are thrilled to be able to co-sponsor this with you. When the pandemic began, as I'm not telling any of you all here anything new, but just to reiterate, millions of Americans were left to scramble without internet access as their third locations went away. Schools, in some places work, coffee shops, libraries, et cetera, and they were left to scramble. When the low quality internet Wi-Fi in Washington, DC cut out, as it often does, 8-year-old Gabriel Alston in Washington, DC and his siblings piled into their mother's car and worked from fast food parking lots. Just 40 miles away in rural Maryland, from where we are here in DC, a teacher was working from her car in the school parking lot because broadband is not even available where she lives. About 96 million Americans don't subscribe to a broadband internet service at home. 72% of white Americans have broadband at home, but only 60% of Black households do. And frankly, we think that's too low on both accounts. We think everyone should have access to broadband at home. But certainly, we want to make sure communities of color are not disadvantaged. Having reliable broadband is as necessary today as having indoor plumbing or electricity. You can't adequately keep up in school without it. My son is in the other room doing homework and engaging in school right now because we have broadband internet at home. You can't communicate with financial institutions without it. You can't compete with business without it. You can't receive job training or frankly, even apply for a job without it. You can't converse easily with government services, and in many cases makes it even hard to get access to a vaccine without it. And yeah, you can't connect with loved ones and the broader community without it. So this is a real moment for us to think about not only healthcare and school access, but also democracy access. As we emerge from the pandemic, it's clear that we need to address gaps in digital equity and inclusion. That's why the National Urban League launched the Lewis Latimer Plan for Digital Equity and Inclusion, a comprehensive plan for government and industry that we developed in partnership with experts in the field. The plan was inspired by the life of Lewis Howard Latimer. He was a free Black patent holder and the son of slaves, whose achievements were critical to the success of his employers, Thomas Edison and Alexander Graham Bell. Although Latimer was a key contributor to Edison and Bell's wealth-creating inventions, he had no ownership stake in the vast businesses that they spawned. And we want to make sure that legacy ends. We need a comprehensive and a sustainable set of solutions to all digital inclusion gaps. We must deploy networks everywhere, which means we have to address availability. That's the Heartland piece. We have to get everyone connected, which means we have to address affordability through broadband subsidy and digital readiness through navigators who help people, including older Americans, adopt internet usage. That's the Beltway piece in any other urban center. We have to use networks to improve how we deliver essential services, and in particular, workforce development, healthcare, and education. And finally, to the Latimer part, we have to ensure that as the digital economy grows and corporations benefit from that growth, as everyone benefits from that growth, communities of color also benefit from that growth. As such, we are calling on President Biden, Congress, and corporate America through the Latimer Plan not to leave anyone behind in this digital age, especially not urban communities, the rural communities, communities of color, and the millions of African Americans, Latinos, and Native populations who make up our nation. So I just thank you so much for having me here today. I'm glad to join you, and I look forward to hearing from the other panelists. With that, I'll throw it to Tina.
Thanks, Joy, and thanks to Heartland Forward for hosting this event today. I'm Tina May, and I'm the Chief of Staff and Vice President of Rural Services here at Land O'Lakes. Land O'Lakes is a farmer-owned cooperative that is situated in over 10,000 rural communities across the country. As Joy and Ross both pointed out the need for broadband, there are 14.5 million Americans that lack broadband today. Over 11 million of those people are in rural places. However, we know that counting folks without broadband is difficult, as I'm sure Chairwoman Rosenworcel is going to point out today with the new FCC Speed Test app. The real total is closer to 42 million Americans that lack connectivity. This is difficult, like Joy mentioned, not just for homework and healthcare and speaking to your loved ones, but for farmers to grow sustainable food, to provide climate smart agriculture solutions as we talk about climate change. So Land O'Lakes really wanted to do our part in solving the digital divide. So last year we started the American Connection Project, now a coalition of over 150 organizations, bringing forward a multi-sectoral approach to push for robust federal investment in broadband infrastructure. Really looking forward to the discussion today. And Angie Cooper with Heartland Forward, over to you.
Thank you so much, Tina. And Joy, thank you for sharing, for both of you, the work that you're doing from the National Urban League and Land O'Lakes and your broader coalitions that you're working with. My name is Angie Cooper, and I am the Chief Programs Officer for Heartland Forward. I'm honored today to welcome FCC Acting Chair Jessica Rosenworcel. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I know this group specifically is very eager to hear about your vision for how we're going to use recently approved federal resources as well as the billions more that will hopefully follow soon to finally close the digital divide. Chairwoman, as we discussed, gearing up for this conversation, the people on the call today are the true doers of what we like to call at Heartland Forward as a think and do tank. But they will be the state and local leaders in their communities, both from a policymaking standpoint and community efforts to really implement the efforts that your team are providing, as well as what more will be coming down from the federal level. Our hope today and for future discussions with this group is to share direct needs that are needed on the ground and how best we can work with the FCC to implement short-term emergency programs and to shape a long-term solution. So as we get started, I would like to focus specifically on the temporary programs that are rolling out now. We're all watching, we're all hearing, and that's why we have such a great group gathered today too, to hear more about some of the specifics. So your agency is in the process of implementing temporary stimulus programs intended to help families access home internet services and connected devices. The long-standing FCC Lifeline affordability program, unfortunately, we know has had some low participation rates over the years. Just 20% of more than 33 million eligible Americans are enrolled. And in some cases, individuals have raised that providers may focus their energies on rolling current Lifeline participants into the emergency broadband benefit to take advantage of higher federal subsidies, which would mean, unfortunately, millions who qualify might not get the right information or education to know what is available to them. So as this group that is listening in today, and we'll have further discussion later in the program, as we think about how states and municipalities start to plan and educate their communities, two kind of main questions come to mind, and we're all eager to understand. So the first two questions for you, Chairwoman, is how can we ensure the emergency broadband benefit will effectively reach eligible households? And then what role can state and local governments and other community partners play in ensuring emergency broadband benefit is successful?
Well, thank you for the good questions, but more important, thank you for having and the commitment you've made to getting 100% of this country connected. I just think that should be the goal. And Heartland Forward, National Urban League, Land of Lakes, I hope we can all join together and just say, we're going to have a 100% policy. We're not going to leave anyone in this country behind. And the good news is we have some new tools to help. And you mentioned the emergency broadband benefit, but you also mentioned our older programs to connect low-income households like the Lifeline program. So let me roll back and try to explain how we got to where we are. It was back when President Reagan was in the White House that the Federal Communications Commission created the Lifeline program. It was based on the idea that every household should have a basic telephone line. And at the time that was like a curly cord and it was, in the wall. I have to explain that to some of the young people in my office. But the amazing thing is that programs continued over the years to help low-income households stay connected, call for services, keep in touch with employers, dial 911 in an emergency. It's a good program. But like you said, it doesn't reach everyone who's eligible. And it only provides $9.25 a month at a maximum for supporting voice telephony. And it's been retooled a little bit over time to try to fit internet access. But the truth is, it wasn't built for the digital age. And in the digital age, dial tone is broadband. We need to get 100% of us to have a broadband connection. So in appropriations legislation late last year, Congress did something really big, really historic. It said, let's create a new program. We'll call it the Emergency Broadband Benefit. And so at the FCC, on a bipartisan basis, we voted to get that program up and running. And what it does is this. It provides low-income households a benefit of $50 a month to support internet service. And on tribal lands, that support goes up to $75 a month. So it's a different system than our early Lifeline system was. It's really broadband centric. And the good news is, since we announced this program, we've surveyed our nation's broadband providers. More than 550 have already signed up, and more are waiting in the wings. And what I hope is that this program, with its substantial support, is going to help households that are struggling in this crisis keep up with education, keep up with work, find jobs, and stay connected to community and commercial life by ensuring that they can have an internet connection that's robust and reliable. Now, you asked, how are we going to get the word out? And that is such an important question, because let me tell you, sitting around in Washington, and frankly, from my dining room table, is not the best place to do it. We're going to have to rely on trusted local institutions and actors. We're going to have to get the word out through people in the communities where they live. And to that end, the FCC set up a portal, and that portal is at fcc.gov/broadband benefits. And we've been signing up local groups, boys and girls clubs, faith organizations, nonprofits, and individuals who want to work to get the word out in their communities. And we have more than 9,000 who've signed up to date, because there's a lot of interest in figuring out how to get people connected in this crisis, because this ongoing crisis has proven to us, like nothing before, that broadband's no longer nice to have, it's need to have for everyone, everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, that last statement is so true. It's need to have. And I think, while we're still all sitting at our kitchen tables having conversations like this via Zoom, we can start that education process soon, but are definitely looking forward to that grassroots education when we can get out in the communities and share. One of the things another big thing that you're working on is the rules for the new E-rate benefits. They have not been established yet, but I was hoping maybe you can talk at high level about how you see the program working alongside EBB to fill urgent gaps. And then again, what can individuals on this phone and other state and local leaders be doing to help support going forward?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked, because the emergency broadband benefit is not the only new connectivity program we started. We're going to start this new program to address what I call the homework gap. And the way I describe the homework gap is, when I was growing up, if I wanted to do my homework, all I needed was a paper, a pencil, and my brother leaving me alone. And that last one was the hard part, right? But today, every student needs internet access. By the way, that was true before this pandemic, but it's so obviously true now. There are 17 million kids in this country who fall into the homework gap and have been locked out of the virtual classroom during this crisis. They're the ones we see sitting outside the fast food restaurant, just trying to catch the Wi-Fi signal to go online for remote class. They're the kids who are in the parking lot, their parents just trying to figure out how they can stay connected so their education can continue. And the hard truth is that during this pandemic, the homework gap has become an education gap. Now it's up to us to make sure it's not a long-term opportunity gap. Let's get every child connected, no matter who they are or where they live. So now, good news. We've been clamoring for this for a long time, and I wish it had started earlier in the pandemic. But in the American Rescue Plan, Congress gave the FCC $7.1 billion to set up a new emergency connectivity fund to address the homework gap. And we're working on developing the rules and policies for that right now, but we're going to borrow from something that already works. You mentioned the E-rate program. E-rate is our nation's largest education technology program, and it's been around since the Telecommunications Act of 1996. That's a program that's used by schools in every state to help get their classrooms connected to high-speed internet service. And the way those subsidies work is that more support is available for rural areas and areas with many students on the free and reduced lunch program. So we already have this E-rate superstructure and system that our schools and libraries are familiar with. And our hope is that we can borrow from that structure as we build this new program to help not just get kids connected at school, but to assist with getting them connected at home for their nightly schoolwork and remote class. And that's going to involve a lot of different things. I don't think there's one single solution, but we're going to look at how many wireless hotspots can we loan out. Shouldn't every school library just naturally have those for loan? We should also look at what cable modems and routers can do to blanket a community with broadband. And we'll look at other more creative ideas too. But the bottom line is this: we have to commit as a nation, not just to end the digital divide, but to also close the homework gap. So every student, no matter who they are, no matter where they live, has a fair shot at educational success. And the goal at the FCC is to have rules and policies voted on by May 10th. We are still collecting comments from interested stakeholders on this subject. They're due on the 23rd. So anyone listening, you are free to lend your voice and tell us your stories. But I think that as a nation, we should commit to getting every child connected. Like I like to say, it should be, we used to have no child left behind. Now we need no child left offline.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So we heard the 23rd is an important date. May 10th is also very important. And, appreciate those of us that work at the state and local level, the importance in your vision of, we don't need to change everything, but how do we build on the system and programs that are working? Obviously this past year, I should say, we learned a lot and will continue to learn a lot over time as these programs roll out. But as you look longer term, how can state and local stakeholders like those that are joining today work with the FCC to shape that future funding and future policy?
I'm so glad that you bring this up because, again, I don't think we're going to figure this all out in Washington. We need people who know what's happening where they live. And something that's occurred to me is that the $3.2 billion for the emergency broadband benefit is appropriated. The $7.1 billion for the homework gap fund is also appropriated. We're going to do good things with this and try to distribute those funds all across the country. But when those funds run out, it's my hope that we can collectively turn to Congress and say, what's the sustainable program for the next? If we know we want to get 100% of us connected, what can we learn from these programs? How they were structured, how the funds were distributed, and who they were able to help, so that we can make sure the programs are stronger, equitable, and fair in the future. So what I would say is help us as we do this rollout, but also survey what worked and what did not, because I don't think this is the end of the discussion. We're going to need successors to these programs. And I think making those successors a success is going to require input from local and federal and state officials, everyone who's seen what went on and has ideas about how we can strengthen it and make it better going forward.
Yeah, what works and what doesn't work. We know specifically in the Heartland too, there are great things happening and people are driving and accelerating how they're getting their communities connected. I'm curious if you have any specific examples of some things happening across the country that have specifically inspired you around this issue or influenced your outlook.
I have so many. Let me start by saying, it was several years ago, I visited rural California, the Coachella Valley, which most people think of for the big musical festival, but this was like the agricultural corner of it. And this was years ago, and there was a superintendent who had gotten the school system to commit to getting every student a laptop or a tablet, and he was trying to really digitize their education and teach a lot of children who were the children of migrant farm workers how the future was going to be online, and was very proud of the work that he had done to get those devices in the hands of those students. But he found after school, they were hanging around the school parking lot. You know, the final bell had already rung, and they were using them sitting on the cement against the school buildings because that was the only place they knew how to get online and actually finish their homework. So they were falling into that homework gap. And he was one of the first superintendents who just put Wi-Fi routers on school buses. Because as he pointed out to me, in rural America, students spend a lot of time on a school bus. Often it's an hour into the building and an hour back at night. And he could turn that ride time into connected time for schoolwork. And he did. And by the way, that's a terrific idea. And there's been legislation introduced to try to copy that in school buses and rural areas across the country. I think it's worth looking at. And one more really good thing that I saw, and this is probably closer to home for you. I visited the medical center at the University of Arkansas. I started studying maternal mortality. You know, we have a crisis in this country, and that there are so many women who have difficulty in childbirth and pass away. And for an industrialized country, it's really stunning what's happening in the United States. And there are so many appointments required when someone's pregnant. But often if you've got a job or other children, keeping up with those appointments is difficult. And I started studying what a group at the University of Arkansas was doing to try to use telemedicine to reach out to populations that might be having difficult pregnancies. And, you know, necessity is the mother of invention. And this just proved it. They had a hard population in the upper Delta they were dealing with, but they started figuring out how they could come up with digital appointments and provide those moms-to-be with pulse oximeters and digital scales, and then set up appointments that didn't require them to drive in, but would give them the opportunity for video consultation where they could get all of their vitals. And what they found out is that the patients kept those appointments at a higher rate than the in-person appointments. And it just taught me that there's so much we can do if we can connect people everywhere. We can do things like improve education, improve healthcare, grow economies. And there's so much innovation happening in all of these corners around the country. Now the task is, how do we gather those narratives? How do we gather those stories and do them all at scale? And the first thing requires connecting 100% of us to make that happen.
You just shared some great examples and some things for us to think about, and great examples for us to lead into our next discussion. I could sit and visit with you and pick your brain for much longer, but unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap. And before we do, and I know that as we lead into our broader discussion with the group, we're very thankful that your staff, Edward and Jessica, will be joining us for that discussion. And if you don't mind, I will share with the group the minute the chairwoman got on, as we were doing, you know, all the fun tech checks to make this work. She said, "I hate I'm going to have to jump, but please, please, please share the feedback." So I think that's, you know, we just really appreciate that, and appreciate all that you and your staff are doing, and just would ask any final thoughts or questions you would like us to ask during the open discussion as we move forward.
I just want to make sure everyone who's here, not just Heartland Forward, the National Urban League and Land O'Lakes, but every single person who's here knows that they can get involved and they can help connect this country. We need your input and we need your energy. But if we do this right, it'll be just like electricity was, you know, 100 years ago, where it seemed like it was impossible or improbable that we could connect everyone everywhere. But we did it, and we made it possible for people everywhere to turn the lights on, and we grew economies in big cities and small towns as a result. This is our challenge now. And I think efforts like this are going to help make it happen. So be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, appreciate your time and all the work that you're doing. You will definitely continue to hear from this group, and let us know what you need from us and how we can be a resource. So with that, I will now kick it over to Catherine DeWitt. Catherine is the project director for the Broadband Access Initiative at Pew Charitable Trust. Many of you are working directly in your states with Catherine and her team, and might honestly be talking to them on a daily basis. We're excited for Catherine to lead the discussion on some specifics on how state and local stakeholders can truly work together to close the connectivity gap. So Catherine, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks so much, Angie. And I'm so happy to be here today. For those of you who don't know me, I am always very excited to talk about states and how we can ensure that states are in the best position to succeed. And the exciting part is that we are expanding that discussion today to talk about localities. I am joined as well by two individuals from the Federal Communications Commission. Jessica Campbell and Edward Bartholomew, whose name I probably just completely butchered on the pronunciation. So if either of you want to pop on and introduce yourselves, and then we can get this conversation going.
Hey, Ed Bartholomew here, and you were close. Didn't butcher it too bad. Ed got some letters off at the beginning, so we're good. But I'm the associate bureau chief in the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, and I oversee our outreach, education, and our consumer complaints division.
Great, thanks, Ed.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Jessica Campbell. I'm an attorney advisor in the Wireline Competition Bureau at the FCC, and I am working on the implementation of the EBB program. And I also, when time allows, work on the Lifeline program.
Wonderful. Thank you both for being here today and being willing to participate in this discussion, especially since it's more live action than what a lot of us have been doing in the last year. I have a whole list of questions that participants and panelists submitted in advance of the event, but before we jump into those, do either of you have any initial thoughts that you'd like to share with the group about kind of where you sit and what your perspective is on the EBB program right now? Jessica, you're first on my screen, so I'm going to turn it over to you.
I don't know if I have anything to add, except that, you know, I'm certainly here to answer any questions that folks have. And I'm also available by email too, if folks have questions that come up after this program today.
Great. Ed?
And I'll just quickly reiterate something that the acting chairwoman said in her remarks. We are really depending on and looking to work with trusted local institutions and partners to help us spread the word. You know, we're not out on the road like we traditionally have been. The FCC has a really good track record of going out and meeting people where they are. And because of the current pandemic and the situation, we can't do that right now. So having partner organizations, trusted voices to help get the word out is so critically important. And if you haven't signed up already, please go to fcc.gov/broadband-benefit. Sign up for our email partner list. That's where you're going to get the latest information. We're working on a toolkit for partners to make use of. We've got some great resources on that website that you can check out as well. So please work with us to help spread the word about this important program.
Thank you. Always a good reminder. And I think we can share all the information as well. I'm sure Abby's team is already on top of that. So just a reminder to our members of the audience, please feel free to raise your hands. I'm going to do my best to try and multitask here and facilitate conversation and keep tabs on the raised hands. So please do that. But I think both Ed and Jessica talked about the importance of communities and also our thought processes, about implementation. We all know that policy is really only as good as the implementation that follows. So let's start there because a lot of questions that came in advance of the event really did focus on that implementation question. How are organizations thinking about responding to this influx of funds? How can they think about pulling in local entities? And how can they think about the sustainability of those interactions? So I'm actually going to call on Matt Schmidt first, who has the fortunate or unfortunate benefit of being one of the states that we work with. And Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you to ask you about how your state is currently focusing on addressing affordability. And if you could walk folks through your process to date, and also about how you were thinking about implementing these federal funds that are coming down. So Matt,
thank you so much.
There you are. Hello.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you everybody for the chance to join you today. And I know there's a lot of great questions, a lot of great perspectives here. So I'll make my answer brief. But about a year ago, the Illinois General Assembly had the foresight to ask our Broadband Advisory Council the question about how much would it cost to ensure affordable broadband access and adoption throughout the state. And so our Broadband Advisory Council worked with some experts over the fall and produced a report for the General Assembly to consider this spring. And so we have some information that we can use right now, not just making best guess estimates, but actually methodologically driven numbers regarding cost scenarios and so forth. So as we look forward to how we might be able to provide affordable broadband statewide or to different subsets of the population, for instance, those living in poverty, we have a pretty good understanding of what it might cost the state. In addition to that, we have the luxury of administering one of the largest state matching grant programs in the country at $400 million, the Connect Illinois Broadband Grant Program. And we bake affordability into our scoring criteria. So we're really serious not only about extending access through infrastructure investment, but also taking affordability into the account from the square one. And so those are two things that we're starting with. But I think moving forward, taking full advantage of these programs that Chairwoman Rosenwitzel mentioned earlier, we want to organize, we want to raise awareness, we want to align organizations around the state and make sure our provider community is leaning in. And so I think it really takes teamwork across the state to take advantage of these funding opportunities to drive affordability and again, help to eliminate the digital divide through awareness participation.
That's a great point. And, Matt, I'm glad you actually brought that point up about the organization and sort of the pulling folks together. I mean, one of the things that I know you and I have talked about, and we've talked about with other states, is the need for resources and support to actually implement these programs. I mean, in order for adoption initiatives to be successful, they have to be not only localized, as everyone's touched on so far, but also fairly high touch. So do you have any thoughts or recommendations about what kind of capacity may be needed for state and local leaders as they think about implementing these programs?
Yeah, just quickly, I think it's important to know that states are in different positions, and not all states have an Office of Broadband, and those that do don't necessarily have a robustly staffed Office of Broadband. And so forging partnerships across sectors is really important to getting the job done, and also making sure that we're aligning efforts. And so, whether it's the Chicago Public Schools, the City of Chicago, or efforts and energy around the state of Illinois that we want to be able to tap into, it's really important that we identify that local energy, we align our efforts, and we're kind of moving forward with a synchronized step, if you will. And so I think that's a take-home message that I would stress to folks. There's not a one-stop shop probably in any state that's going to ensure that state takes full advantage of these programs. Rather, we need to identify those organizations across sectors to lean into this together.
Thanks. Jessica, Ed, do you have any responses to what Matt just outlined?
I think Matt hit on some great points about the different capacities. And one of the things that we've really focused on in putting together, some resources and materials to support consumers, partners, states, localities, and getting the word out about this is having it be sort of as grab and go, as plug and play as possible. There doesn't need to be sort of internal development time put into creating the flyers, the graphics, the handouts. We're trying to have those that people can just take them and make use of them. So hopefully that saves on some partner resources, some state level resources, but can completely appreciate that not all states and localities are staffed and funded in the same way for supporting programs like this and for helping to get the word out. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for them to work with us here.
That's really helpful to know. Are those resources available yet, or will they be rolled out soon?
Coming soon.
Okay, great. All right, y'all heard it here first. Let's see. Sorry, I'm referring to my list of questions that I have here. We do have a couple of questions here about the sustainability of this program. So of course there's sort of a time limit on the EBB program. And several folks asked, one, should they be thinking about the sustainability of these programs? How can they plan for that? And are there any discussions about extending the timeline of the EBB as well?
Sure, I can take that. I think how long the program lasts has been the $3.2 billion question. The Congress, when they created their statute, they told us that the program will last until the funds run out or 6 months after HHS declares the end of the emergency period tied to the pandemic. think it's reasonable to suspect that the money will likely run out first. There are a couple of things that stakeholders can do to kind of track spending, track the activity in the program. One is, and the FCC mentioned this in its order, is that there will be a tracker that will be posted on USAC's website that will present the amount of disbursements from the Emergency Broadband Connectivity Fund, the number of households enrolled, and then the households being added week to week. So that should, again, give some transparency to those who are looking to kind of monitor and read some tea leaves and try to predict, how long this program will last. Another thing too is that the FCC, in coordination with the USAC, and I think I mentioned them before and failed to actually define them. They are the Universal Service Administrative Company who will be implementing the broadband benefit program. And they, in coordination with FCC, will also be forecasting, making the end of the program. And the goal is to provide notice about the end of the program, again, to give participants and providers and other stakeholders at least 60 days notice of the end of the program so they can plan accordingly.
And if I could just jump in and sort of piggyback, I think Jessica and the team that drafted this bill deserve a lot of credit because they made sure that there were some important consumer protections for when the program does end included in sort of the design of the program. So not only do consumers get notice, but consumers need to affirmatively agree to continue getting a service that they're going to be billed for. So that really prevents consumers from getting an unexpected bill when the discount program is run out and suddenly instead of paying $0 or $50 less than they anticipated paying, they suddenly have a bill that's $50 higher than what they were used to paying potentially. So that's an important protection that's been built into the design of the program as well.
Really helpful to know. So of course we have the cost of the subscriptions themselves, but we also have a couple of questions in here about access to devices. Specifically, how can Americans use the connected device benefit? Does it apply to refurbished devices? And where can they actually spend it? So any advice with respect to that questions?
Sure, I'll start. So the connected device is a reimbursement, is a one-time reimbursement up to $100 for a laptop, desktop, or tablet. This is actually a device. This isn't like a coupon that a household will get and then they go to Best Buy and buy the device for themselves. This is something that will be distributed by the provider to the households, and the households also need to pay a copay of more than $10 or less than $50 in order to, again, be eligible to receive the device and for the provider to receive reimbursement for the device. So it doesn't quite work as I think your question teed up. Again, it's not going to be where folks are getting a coupon and going to Best Buy. This will be distributed by the provider. And not all providers are required to distribute and make available connected devices for reimbursement. On the FCC website, we have a list of those providers that have so far have elected to participate in the program and have cleared this administrative process in order to be listed on the website. And there you'll see the providers that have acknowledged that, yes, they will be distributing devices. So again, it's not every provider, but you can see that information on the FCC's website.
Okay, so just to confirm, it is the providers have to actually offer this service, and then the reimbursement will flow through the providers down to the customer.
That's right. So the provider will, deliver the device to the household. Mm-hmm. The household will to be charged between more than $10 and less than $50 for the device, and then the FCC, through this Emergency Broadband Connectivity Fund, will reimburse the provider up to $100 for the delivery of that device.
Got it. Okay, thank you. We have about a minute left until we turn things over to Blair. So Ed and Jessica, any final parting words of wisdom as we think about, and the folks on this phone really think about, how can they better work with and access these federal funds coming through?
You want to go first, Jessica?
Well, I think you have a few things you might want to promote, so I'll let you go.
Again, if it's, if you can visit the website, fcc.gov/broadband benefit, help us spread the word. I'll also again echo some remark the acting chairwoman said. Tracking and working with us to keep an eye on how effective the program is, right? Is the messaging working? What's the uptick rate? Are you running into resistance when you talk to people about this opportunity? Or do people say that, oh, this doesn't seem real, right? Too good to be true. Keep the feedback flowing. Let us know what's working. Let us know if there are things that you have that you need that you don't see on our website. We are going to have a lot of materials available in a lot of languages: Spanish, Vietnamese, Korean, Tagalog, traditional Chinese, Arabic, Somali, and a few others. So we want to get the word out to as many people as possible, and just keep that feedback loop going, please.
And I'll add, USAC also created a consumer-based website called getemergencybroadband.org. There's a lot of information there about eligibility requirements and how to apply when that functionality is available. There's also webinars that USAC is hosting, and there's FAQs listed on their site as well as on the FCC's website. This was a 75-page order. There's a lot to digest. So if there you have questions, I encourage you to take a look at those FAQs.
And one last thing, we announced last Friday that we're having a public webinar on the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program that's designed for consumers and partners. And that'll be coming up next Tuesday. So that'll be the 27th.
All right. Well, thank you very much to both of you for all the information that you provided. And I will turn it back over to Angie, who will take it forward from here.
Great. Thanks, Catherine. Actually, we're going to continue this great discussion, and I'm going to do another kickover to Blair to kick us off with a few more specifics and discussion. So Blair, please introduce yourself to the group.
Thank you very much. I'm Blair Levin. I'm with the Brookings Institution, and also for the last year, I've been working with the National Urban League in the development of the Latimer Plan. These conversations are designed to both improve the implementation of these short-term measures that Congress has granted to the FCC, but also to help set the stage for more permanent solutions, because at the end of the day, to prevent the kinds of harms that were done during COVID, we really need to make sure there's a permanent solution. And so for the next 10 minutes, and I really would like to open this up to a lot of folks, to just offer some initial thoughts about how they think Congress and the administration and the FCC should really look at more permanent solutions to making sure that all can afford to be connected. I'd like to start off by asking Angela Seifert, who's in the audience, but hopefully she can unmute herself and turn on her camera. Angela is well known in the area of adoption. She runs the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, which I think is the country's largest kind of group of local communities. And Angela, I'd like to give you a chance to respond to everything that's been said, because you have a lot of real world experience in trying to get people on. But in particular, I was struck by how the FCC is trying to simultaneously, while acknowledging that these solutions really have to be localized, have to be very high touch. At the same time, we need to be able to scale the solutions. We need certain kinds of standardized materials. How do the folks that work with your organization look at those issues, and how should we be thinking about the long-term solution? Angela, are you on?
I am. Thanks, Blair. Thanks to everyone for doing this today. The format of everybody talking back and forth is fabulous. I really loved hearing Commissioner Rosenworcel talk about the use of EBB as let's learn from this, because I think that's absolutely right. Yes, let's learn from this. And then if we can get some more temporary money from Congress to help us learn just a little bit longer, because as mentioned, we don't know how long that 3.2 billion is going to last. So if we can learn just a bit longer, and then we can go after that permanent subsidy. But what that permanent subsidy is it going through Lifeline? Is it going through Congress? I think we have to know more about how this is working before we can figure out the best way for that to happen. And as noted in the Latimer plan, there are other sources of funding that could potentially be paying for broadband. And so being able to look at, can we get any of those to be functioning too? Might we learn from different places, not just EBB? In fact, the Emergency Connectivity Fund, that's also been mentioned, and that's another place where we're going to learn. And I should note, we have actually been learning for a bit because we had unintentional experiments during the pandemic because local governments and state governments decided to pay for broadband service. So that kind of understanding what's happening locally is necessary. So NDIA just added, we have a series of webinars, and we added a webinar to it because we feel like there's a lot to learn from those unintentional experiments.
Great. And with that, I'd like to, I know we have a lot of people from state and local governments who are on. I'd like you to, if any of you would like to offer lessons that you learned, I certainly want to make this time available to do that. And I would note that in particular, a number of states used the original CARES Act funding to try to get school kids connected. Angela, I think you guys you were involved in a number of those. Were there any state or local efforts that you thought either gave us a real positive example of how we should be thinking about it, or not because they made mistakes, but just because it was a brand new program, negative lessons that we learned about the way we shouldn't be doing it?
Yeah, I think lots of places learn not to just buy a bunch of hotspots and, hand them out as quickly as possible without knowing if there's enough tech support inside that home, if the adults in the home have the digital skills to be able to support the student, right? Like that more is needed, not just the connectivity. And then I think we also learned from Chicago in particular, because they in advance lined up community-based organizations to be able to help the local households who were being given the connectivity with the other needs that they have, the digital literacy, the devices, right? That kind of hands-on, who do I turn to question. And I see Rick Usher has joined us. So Blair, if I can suggest maybe you call on Rick from Kansas City.
Hey, Rick, good to talk to you again. What lessons do you guys think you learned in terms of how the federal government should look at this for a permanent solution?
Well, thanks, Blair. Good to see you. And thanks, Angela. I turned my camera on, so thanks for seeing me. I think the challenge is, I'll just go right to the heart of, my concern is that we're calling this an emergency broadband benefit, but not requiring providers to provide 25/3 internet services. I think that I know we have providers in Kansas City that can't provide those speeds in some of our most economically distressed neighborhoods, and actually can only provide like 1.5 megabit speed. So lesson learned really is what we've seen in our school districts, that mobile Wi-Fi hotspots are a Band-Aid solution. In our Kansas City, Missouri school district, we have hotspots, but families are coming in halfway through the month to get another hotspot because they've used their data plan. We've actually seen families dropping internet services they may have been paying for to take advantage of the free hotspots through the school district. So one lesson there is that, we didn't actually move to pay for home connection services as quickly as, say, some other areas in the country. But that's my main concern really in the program is the speed. The other, while I have the mic, is the lack of funding in the program to local outreach partners. The burden is on the ISPs and wireless providers. We're organizing local outreach partners to ramp up this effort. It's been compared to the 2020 census, where we did the same thing, pretty much the same group of outreach partners trying to get hard to count communities. We're trying to get hard to connect communities. But there were grants and funding opportunities there for local government and other nonprofits that know the folks that we need to meet with.
Yeah. Rick, you're making a really interesting point, and I would just note that the state of New York last week, as part of a large budget bill, passed a requirement that all fixed ISPs, as opposed to mobile, provide a program minimum speeds 25 down, didn't specify the upload speeds, at a price of not more than $15, or alternatively 200 down at a price of not more than 20. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I would just note that all the major providers in New York State are currently doing similar kinds of programs, but a number of smaller ones, particularly serving more exurban and rural communities, are not. But one of the things that you're, I think, pointing out, and I think is really important, is there have to be also kind of minimum data plans for them to be used for the homework app. A lot of homework, but also a lot of telehealth, a lot of workforce development. These tend to use video. That uses a lot more data. Does the Kansas City experience tell us something about how to think about these minimum data plans as a way of making sure that all can fully participate in the economic, civic, educational lives of their communities?
Well, yeah, I think the answer to that is no data caps.
Uh-huh.
That's the answer. And so the digital divide is starting to look really, really peculiar in Kansas City when you look at implementing this program, because you're going to have one provider in the program that can only maybe provide you with 1.5 megabit per second. You've got another that's going to provide you with 25 or more. Both of those, I think, are without data caps. And then you've got wireless providers that are going to have data caps on their plans. So the real challenge is going to be lining all of these up in a spreadsheet so that you can then let the consumer make choices based on what their needs are. We're working with the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and locally we've got the Coalition for Digital Inclusion, and I think Aaron Deacon at KC Digital Drive.
Yep.
They have Aaron last summer launched an internet access support program that was paying and still is paying for internet services for families. And they're seeing every bill from every provider, and they're seeing these gaps. I mean, we've got some neighborhoods where the customer has been told by their provider, this is the last month we're going to provide service on, because we can't squeeze any more juice out of this 100-year-old copper wire.
Yeah. Well,
and they're not making investment. So there's a lot of challenge, and I don't feel comfortable as a local government representative saying, hey, subscribe to this. I don't think you can say that any provider in EBB is providing an equitable service. You want to make a recommendation toward the one that's going to meet the needs of the consumer.
Right. Well, we've got just a couple minutes left. Angela, I want to come back to you because there are a lot of different options at the table, and hopefully we'll have another seminar spending all of the time on a permanent solution, but hopefully after we've learned from some of the experimentation with the EBB that the FCC is doing, as well as what we might think of as the E-rate augmentation program, and use those lessons to help formulate the further ideas. And whether it be a permanent EBB, as a number of ISPs and civil organizations suggested last week, it could be retooling Lifeline in a way that was kind of hinted at by the acting chair. It could be something like the way New York State is thinking about doing it. It could be, Angela, as you said, utilizing federal government programs that serve low-income people, but would actually save money by making sure that the people they're serving are online, using both that savings and that distribution mechanism. But one thing, Angela, you've talked about a lot, and I think is very compelling, I just want to close with it, is it's not enough to simply provide the subsidy. There's a need for capacity building and a need for digital readiness. Can you just talk for a minute about that?
Yeah, and I think we learned this lesson through those unintentional experiments. We've had the low cost offers for a while, and there's been low take rates on those, but we often chalked it up to folks just don't know. There's not a lot of outreach. But then when we had school districts and community-based organizations purchasing broadband service, and lots of folks, lots of households having this free service available to them, and they're not always accepting free service, then it becomes this question of why aren't folks accepting free service? And then so when you dig into it, it becomes, oh, this is more complicated than any of us really want it to be, right? Because when you dig in, you're like, oh, there's privacy issues, there's trust issues, there's security issues, there's free internet sounds like a scam. Right. There's the issues of if it's a 2 or 3 months or you don't really know how long it's going to last. Okay, that sounds really scammy. Also, not sure how long it's going to last, and what happens afterwards. You're going to hit me with a $70 bill, so no, thank you. Right. So lots of reasons why somebody would say no, but those different reasons vary per person. And so what we know for sure is that we have to make sure that there's that trusted institution that's involved to help guide a family towards, okay, just as Rick was saying, is a hotspot your best solution? Maybe, right? If you're actually not housing secure, that mobile solution probably is a better solution because you can take it with you. But if you are housing secure, then you want something that's more reliable. I mean, everybody wants something that's more reliable, right? But you could do something that's more reliable then. And so that means that maybe there has to be somebody coming into your home to set it up. Okay, now I'm feeling uncomfortable again, right? There's all kinds of reasons why it wouldn't work. So how do we get it to work? And it's by having somebody who can help guide a household through all those steps. And it's that digital literacy, right? So what are the other resources? Maybe it turns out the problem is a device. Right. Well, then where do you get the device from? Where's that subsidy coming from? Or is there an organization who has a lower cost device? So this brings us all back to the point of having a digital navigator or having somebody that is trusted in the community that can help guide.
Well, that's a great place to end it. With that, Angela, thank you. Rick, thank you. Angie, let me turn it back to you.
Thanks, Blair. Appreciate the great discussion and everyone's input. And we will absolutely be following up with more questions and comments. Catherine, thank you again for leading the discussion on your end. Before we officially wrap up, I wanted to give you kind of a sneak preview of a research project that is underway at Heartland Forward. And it touches on some of the specifics that we've talked about today, both in the discussion and with the chairwoman. And the specific research is around affordability. We all talk probably almost every day amongst some of you that we need more data, and we need the data to be right and credible. And Heartland Forward has specifically looked at an opportunity where we think there might be a data gap. So that critical gap is around what we see is broadband options available around the pricing structures associated with these options in any given community. Currently, right now, the federal government does not collect subscription or pricing data from internet service providers. This makes it difficult to estimate potential new adopters and revenue when technology and infrastructure is deployed and upgraded. So Heartland Forward is working to help fill that gap, as I said earlier, through some research that we have launched. We have just completed surveys in 20 Heartland states to better understand consumer preferences. And those preferences specifically are around the speed, the data limits, quality, and price. And then our next step specifically will be to analyze the findings and create a guide that will help states, hopefully help many of you on the phone, do a couple of things. So those things and what will be included in the guide will look at the estimate of the price point at which consumers consider internet access to be unaffordable. We'll generate some price estimates for households based on characteristics like location, age, educational attainment, household income, and specifically digital skills. We'll estimate some of those uptake rates for proposed high-speed internet. And then again, we'll create a tool that recommends appropriate pricing for your communities and for your states. But as we continue our efforts and develop the output of our research, we absolutely need your help. We need your comments. We need your suggestions. We all know we don't need another guide that no one opens or utilizes. So you'll see at the bottom of the screen is my direct contact information. Please email me directly, and I hope to hear from you on where this could be a useful tool and any other specific outcomes that you'd like to see as we're looking at that affordability opportunity and the gap in the data that exists today. So we're getting close to the end. As we think about sort of next steps and the three key takeaways, listening to the discussion and what really is top of mind for us at Heartland Forward and our other partners, I want to point out three key takeaways. The first is, we know this, but the emergency broadband benefit is coming from the federal government, and the program's success has to have input from the state and local level. I think we have good partners, and thank you again, Jessica and Ed, for joining the discussion, and for the chairwoman. But we have good partners, and they're willing to listen. So let's keep doing that. Heartland Forward and our group will continue to be in touch about how we share that information and collectively continue to interact with you. The second one is, again, everyone has to be involved. So as we hear and talk about, these programs, the short-term programs, the long-term programs, we've got to share information, and we have to share best practices. You're obviously sharing them with your states and communities and your networks now, but continue to share. And as Angela mentioned, kind of this trust factor, I think it's really key about how we get out in the communities and share the information. And while we rely on communicating in the digital age, we probably really do need to think about not everything can be online because we're trying to communicate with some people that are not online. So how do we creatively do that going forward? And then the last, kind of the third point as a key takeaway is at Heartland Forward, and through this discussion today, we believe closing the divide, as I said earlier, is an equity and economic imperative. So in order to really get this done in an accelerated way, we need to think of this as effort like a campaign. We are truly working against a clock, and it will take that creativity. It'll take that boots on the ground. It will take that continued communication to make sure we're getting this done. So again, thank you so much for your time and participation today. And we look forward to continued conversations. We plan to reconvene at the same time next month with our workshop series, Connecting the Heartland. And the key component that we'll focus on next month is digging into a little bit more the new federal funding and proposals specifically designed to close the availability gap. So be on the lookout in your inboxes for more information of reconvening next month. If you think that there's people that maybe didn't participate today that should, again, you have my contact information. Let us know. And a last shout out to Catherine and Blair and our co-host of National Urban League and Land O'Lakes. Appreciate all that you're doing, and we look forward to being in touch. Please, everyone, share your best practices, and we're eager to help highlight and promote the great work that you're all doing. So thank you, and hope everyone has a great day, and look forward to being in touch.